Hi there, it's Hannah the Artisan Duck, and I'm going to show you today how I make this two heart sort of interlocking heart pattern, and then at the end I shall show you the necklace that I've made with them. For these hearts today, I've got my pattern that I've worked out, and I'll be using this throughout to show you how I'm going to build my hearts. I've also got my beading needle ready with my thread, and this is 31 inches of thread, which is really specific, but it's just, you know, I've measured it out so there won't be too much waste at the end when you've cut off, but it should leave you enough thread to comfortably tie your knots. I'm also going to be using size 11 Delica beads. I've got these off to the side, but I'm using this bronze colour, like a cream, and then these two different reds, and I shall put the names of the beads down in the description. To start our beading, we're going to start on this full row here, because obviously it's a bit fiddly to start up here. So the first row we're going to pick up is one of our sort of bronze colours, a cream, two more bronze, and then we've got a dark red, a light red, two dark red, a light red, and a dark red. The first beads we're going to pick up is one of our sort of copper colour and the cream colour, which is actually called Galvanised silver, which makes no sense to me because it is more of a cream, but that's what it's called. So if you read that in the description below and think I've gone slightly loopy, that's what it's called. And this bronze is something like transparent rose, so I don't think the names correlate perfectly, but that's what they are in the description below. So I'm going to pull that down my thread, and I'm going to take it as far down so that I leave a 10-inch tail, just under 10 inches. So I've left my 10-inch tail, and you need to leave that because we're going to use that tail at the end to go and add the little details on the top of the heart. I'm going to take my needle now back up through that bronze coloured bead and pull, and it should mean that the cream and the silver bead are sitting side by side. Might need a little shiggle, but there we go, they're sitting side by side now. We need to now move on so we can continue the row of beading. So we're going to go down through that cream bead like so, and now we're ready to add the next bead. So the next bead is one of these copper beads. I'm going to take my needle into the top of the previous bead, so we're going to sort of form a loop with the thread so that when we pull through, the new bead is going to sit alongside the one we previously added. I'll just get that straight. There we go, just like that. The beading is always slightly sort of wobbly at the beginning because there's not much to hold it straight, so that's fine, it will sort itself out. And now, because we're coming out of this cream bead and we need to continue adding beads, I'm going to go back up through that copper bead, and then we'll be ready to move on. So the next bead in our row is another of our sort of bronze copper colours, and I'm going to just take that up the previous bead, so we're making that loop again, and pull, and now we need to move our needle through into the bead on the end so that we can continue beading. The next bead in our row is this dark red, so we're coming out the bottom of the previous bead, so we're going to go in through the top to form that loop again and pull, and now we need to go back up the red so that we are ready to move on. The next bead is our light red. I'm just going to go back in to that previous red and pull, and make sure that's sitting reasonably nicely, and then I'm going to take my needle back through the light red so that we're in the right position and take through. Now I'm going to pick up another dark red and go down into the top of that red bead, or the light red bead, and we're going to go back up through the dark red. There we go. And now we're moving on with another dark red bead. We're going to go back up through the previous bead and pull, and now we're going to go back through that red bead at the end take through. We've only got 2 more beads in this row. One of them is a light red, so we're just going to go through the top there and pull through. And we're going to go back up through that light red bead, and then the last bead in this row is a dark red bead. There we go. So I'm just going to go up through the bottom of that red and pull through. And just so we're in the right position to continue in the next row along, we're going to take our needle back down that red bead. Now your beading should look something like this. If it has got a bit too loose, you can go in and just tighten it, but otherwise you should have a nice beaded foundation to start your brick stitch. So we're exiting out of this dark red on the end here, and the next 2 rows are increasing, so we need to pick up 2 beads to begin with. So we're going to start with a dark red, and then we have 5 of our light reds followed by a dark red on the end, and then we've got 3 of our cream beads with one of our sort of bronze at the end. So to start this row, I've picked up a dark red first on my needle and then my light red, because the dark red is going to be on the outer edge. So I'm just going to take my needle under the threads that are joining those beads together and pull through. And then I'm going to take my needle back up through the lighter red bead and pull through to tighten. And these first, particularly this sort of second row, I really like to go in and make sure that those beads are sitting nice and firmly, because as you can see it starts to force the other beads on the previous row to sit as they should. So my next bead is a light red, and I'm just going to take my needle again into that little thread that's going between the beads and pull through. And then take your needle back up through the light red bead and tighten your thread. There we go. So we now need to pick up another light red bead. I'm just going to take it into that bridging thread again and pull through, like so. It's always fiddly when I start because there's not much to hold on to, and I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. And pull, and then we're going to go back up through the light red to secure in place. And I won't make you watch every bead that I add. I'm just going to show you the first few and then sort of show you the pattern and discuss what colours I'm adding, and then sort of skip through some of the sections. You can work on it on your own. But I won't leave you high and dry. I'll always sort of tell you what I'm going to add, and it won't be in big sections either. It'll just be like finishing a row off. So we've got 2 more of our light red beads to add. So I've got my light red bead and I've got my bridging threads here, and I can see that there are 2 threads because of how we sort of started the first row of beading. So I'm just going to take my needle under one of those threads. It just makes it slightly easier just to use the one and pull through. And then we're going to go back up through the light red bead. There we go. I've got 1 more light red bead to add and then my dark red bead, and once I've done those I shall come back and we'll be ready to move on to the lighter beads here. I've added the rest of the red beads in this row, and now I'm moving on to one of my cream beads, and I'm just going to take my needle under the next bridging thread there and pull through, and then we're going to go back up through that bead. The next bead in the row is another cream, so I'm just going to take the needle under that bridging thread, pull, and then I'm going to go back up through that bead to secure it. Now I've got this thread here sort of facing in towards the beadwork, and ideally we want that back up through the top. And you can see there's 2 threads joining those beads at the top. So I'm just going to take this thread and take it back up through this bead and pull it through so it's exiting on the other side. There we go. Nothing's going to fall off because it's nice and secure. Now we are going to be joining onto this bridging thread here, which is essentially this loose tail. So I am going to hold that quite firmly sort of in this hand for a minute so that it doesn't move around when I add the next bead. But I'm just going to pick up a cream bead. So I'm just going to take my needle through that bridging thread, but I'm maintaining to hold that quite firmly in my other hand so it doesn't pull up as I add this one on. So just pull through, and I'm going to go back up through the bead to secure it in place. So keep hold of that tail thread because we're going to use the bridging thread again for the last bead. We've run out of threads that we can attach onto now, and because we're increasing we still need to add a bead on. So I've picked up my copper bead and I'm going to take my needle under again and use that same bridging thread and pull through, and then I'm going to make sure it's sitting relatively in the right position and take my needle back up through the copper bead, and I'm just going to sort of tighten it again to make sure it's sitting as it should. But there is our second row complete. So now we're exiting out of this bead on the end here, and we're going to start this third full row here. So we're going to pick up a copper and one of our cream beads to begin with because we are extending, so we need to pick up 2 to begin, and then we've got 2 more of our cream, and then we've got a dark red, a light red and a copper. This is where it starts to sort of make it look like the hearts are entwining, and then we've got 4 more light reds followed by a dark red. I've got my copper and my cream bead on my needle, with the copper going on first because it's on the outer edge, and I'm just going to take my needle under that bridging thread and pull through. And we're just going to continue adding the beads on in the exact same manner. So I'm going to go back up through this bead like so, and now I'm going to add on my other 2 cream beads. I should be back in a minute when I've done that before we move on to the next section. So I've got those cream beads all added, and the next bead is one of my dark red beads. So I'm going to take that into that bridging thread and pull through. And then I'm going to take my needle back up through the red to secure it in place. Like so. I'm going to take my needle and pick up a light red, and we're just going to go under that bridging thread there again and pull, and I'm going to go back up through the red to secure it in place. And then the last sort of bead in this sort of entwined section, if you see what I mean, is one of our copper beads, and we're going to just take that through and pull, and then we're going to go up to secure it in place. There we go. So now I've got 4 more of my light red beads to add, and then a dark red at the side. So I shall add the light red beads and then come back when we add the one off to the side. I've added on those 4 light red beads, and we just need to add the red at the side. So I've got my dark red bead, and I'm just going to take my needle sort of under those sort of bridging threads, or the threads going between those beads, and pull through. And then I'm going to take my needle back down the dark red bead to secure it in place. And I'm just going to go in to tighten to make sure it's sitting nicely. There we go. Now we're ready to move on. We're now exiting out the bottom of this dark red bead on the edge here, and we are working our way back in, so we don't have any more row increases, we're decreasing all the way down. So we start off with a dark red followed by 3 light reds, then we've got more of this sort of entwined section here, so we've got a bronze, a cream and then a dark red, followed by 3 of our cream beads and a bronze on the end. Because our row is not increasing anymore, we're just going to pick up 1 bead to begin with, and then we're going to take the needle straight under that bridging thread, and just by picking up the one bead, it'll sort of bring the beadwork in for us. I'm going to go back up through the bead to secure it like that, and you can see it sort of staggered it and moved it inwards. You will see the thread on the outside of the bead, and that's absolutely fine. Just make sure that your thread colour sort of corresponds with the colours in your beading, or at least is neutral enough that it's not going to really stand out. So I've got 3 more light red beads in this row, so I'm going to go away and do those and then come back when we do this section in the middle together. Those 3 light red beads are added, and my next bead is a copper, and I'm just going to take the needle under that bridging thread like that and pull through. I'm going to go back up through the bead to secure it in place. The next bead is a cream, so I'm just going to use that bridging thread to secure it and go back up. And now we're finishing off this little section with a dark red bead, and that's just going to go straight next to the cream bead. Back up to secure. There we go, and we're now ready to move on to the second heart. So we now need to add 3 of our cream beads with a copper at the end, and because we're not increasing, you're just going to be using the bridging threads for those beads. So I'm going to go away and do that and come back and show you, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next row. There we go, there's our finished row, so I'll just bring the pattern back in to look at. So we are exiting out of this cream bead here, so we're going to start by picking up 1 of our bronze beads, and then we're going to go on to add 4 of our cream beads, and then we're adding a bronze on the end, and then we've just got 3 light red and a dark red. Because the row isn't increasing, we're just going to pick up the 1 bead to begin with, and I'm going to take the needle under that first bridging thread and pull, and then I'm going to go back up through the bead to secure it in place. Now we've got 4 of our light cream to add and 1 of our copper beads at the end, so I'm going to go away and do that, so add those 5 beads in total, and then I shall come back when we're ready to move on to the next bit. There we go, and now we are ready to add our lighter red beads. So I'm just going to pick up my first one and take it through. Then we're going to go back up through the same bead to secure. We've got another light red bead, so just take that under that bridging thread and pull through. And then we're going to go back up through to secure. We need another light red bead. Just going to go into that bridging thread and pull through and back up, and now we need a dark red bead on the end there, so just take needle in that last bridging thread and we're going to pull through to secure. There we go, and those hearts are starting to separate again now. You can sort of see with this heart is starting to draw back in. So we are exiting out of this bead here, so now we've just got a dark red followed by 3 light red beads, and then we've got a bronze, 3 of our cream, and then another bronze on the end. So I've just picked up my dark red bead, and we're going to go straight into the bridging thread on those beads below and pull, and I shall go away and add the remaining 3 light red beads and come back to you for the second heart. Right, those beads are added, and now we're ready to move on to the other heart. So I've picked up a bronze bead to start with, and I'm just going to take my needle under the bridging thread there and pull through, and then go back up. There we go. And now we need to add the remaining cream beads. So that's 3 cream beads, and then we're going to finish with a bronze on the end. So I'm going to go away and do that, and I shall come back and show you when I've done it. There we go, those beads are added and we're ready to bring the pattern back in. So we are exiting out this bead here, and we're ready to move on to this row. So we've got equal amounts of each heart, and you can see this is the last full row before they separate to the peaks, sort of at the bottom here. So we start with a bronze. We've got 2 of our cream and a bronze, and then a dark red, lighter red, 2 lighter reds, and a dark red on the end. So we just pick up one of our bronze beads to begin with and go straight into the bridging thread and pull through. I've got one of my cream beads, and we're going to go into the next bridging thread and pull up, and then we're going to get another cream bead straight into the next bridging thread along and pull and go back up, and then a copper bead on the end to finish that heart off. There we go. Now I'm moving on to the red heart, so I've picked up my dark red bead. I'm going to go straight into the bridging thread next along. I don't know why I'm making that look so difficult. There we go. And pull back up. There we go. And now we just finish this row. So we've got 2 light reds to add and then a dark red on the end. So I shall go away and do that and come back to show you and to move on. There we go, that row is all completed, and I'm just going to bring my pattern back in. We're now going to work on this section here. So we're exiting out this dark red on the end here. So we're going to do this section as a whole. So we've got the next row is dark red, a light red, a dark red, and then we go up to just 2 dark reds with another dark red on the very end. So we're going to just start off by picking up a single dark red bead, and we're just going to take that in and go back up to secure it in place. I'm then going to pick up my light red bead and just go into the next bridging thread along and pull. And we're going to go back up through that bead to secure it in place. The last bead in this very short row is a dark red, so I'm just going to use that bridging thread and we're going to go back up to finish that row off. Right, now we're just going to go ahead and pick up a dark red bead and just go straight into the next bridging thread along and pull up, and then we're going to pick up another dark red and go into the bridging threads there, pull the needle through, and we're going to pull up, and then the last bead on this section here is a dark red. So I'm just going to take my needle under the bridging threads there and pull through, and then I'm going to pull up. Right, I'm not going to over tighten for a minute because I want this bead to sit nice and flat. So to make sure it stays secure and in place, because obviously this side is loose, I'm going to take the needle back down into the dark red just on the row below and pull that through. You'll see as it tightens, it just encourages that bead there to sit correctly, but we also need to be moving in this direction so we can do the point on the other heart. So I'm now going to continue down. I'm just going to go through the next bead on the edge on the row below. I'll move my thread in a minute so you can see what I mean. So I'm just going through this red on the outer edge of my heart there, and we're going to pull through, and then we're going to continue down into the next one down like that and pull, and then we're just going to jump across into the copper bead that's right next to it and pull through, and just pull so that thread disappears between the beading. And now we're ready to match this other side up with what we've already done. So we're going to start off by picking up one of our copper beads and just going into the bridging thread that's sitting between that copper there and the cream on the previous sort of row, and just pull through, and we're going to go back up to secure it. And at this point we're just literally matching exactly what we did on the other side. So I'm going to pick up one of my cream beads, or the last cream bead, and use the next bridging thread along and pull, and I'm going to go back up through the cream to secure in place. We've got another of our sort of bronze beads. We're just going to go in on the last bridging thread, pull through, and we're going to go back up to secure, and now we're ready to move on to the next row. So I am going to pick up another of my bronze beads and take that into that bridging thread and pull, and go back up to secure in place. I'm going to grab another of my copper beads or bronze beads, pull through, and we're going to go back up to secure like that. Now the last bead is another copper. I'm going to use that last bridging thread there, take my needle through, and then I'm going to go back up through the bead like that, and I'm going to take my needle down into the copper on the outer edge of the beading and on the row below, and this will help secure it and make sure it sits nicely. I'm just going to pull to tighten, and we're now ready to move onto the top section. Now I know how I'm going to use these hearts in my finished project, so I need to tie some knots in my thread, and I can do this before I start the top because I'm going to tie the knots on this thread just up this section here, and when I come to tie this tail thread off I'll be doing it on the other side, and I'm just going to use the jump rings on the sort of outer parts of the heart. So this is a good chance just to show you how I tie my knots as well. So I'm just going to take my needle into the next copper bead along, like so, just to sort of move through a little bit more and pull. And now I'm going to tie my first knot. So I'm going to take my needle and I'm just going to push it between these beads, and you can see I've caught a thread there that's, it'll probably be another bridging thread that's running between the beadwork down here. I'm just going to use that thread to tie my knots. I'm just going to pull through and make a loop, and then I'm taking my needle through the loop and I'm pulling, and then I'm going to go up into the next bead along. There we go, and pull through. Now I will do that sort of knotting process a few more times, and obviously if you were still unsure how you wanted to use your heart, you might not want to tie off your threads just yet. Just leave them longer and tie them off at the end when you know what you're going to be doing with it. And now I'm going to just off camera put my needle on my tail thread, and we'll come back to finish the top section. So now we're ready to move on to this little top section here, and you can see it's just the sort of the outer colours that we're using. So I need to add 2 copper, and then we're going to miss a bit, and then we're going to add another copper and 2 dark reds. We're going to miss a bead and then finish off with 2 dark red beads. So I'm exiting out of the cream, which is the second bead in. So I've got my copper bead on my needle, and I'm just going to take my needle back to use the threads. It's like we're going backwards, if that's what it feels like. So I'm going to use this bridging thread here on the end and pull through. And then I'm going to go back up to secure it in place. There we go. So whilst we need to move this way, if we pull over, that bead's going to tip up. So I'm just going to take my needle down into the sort of the copper just below it, and I've been careful not to tie my knots too high because I want to make sure to leave these top beads clear of the knots. So I'm just going to take that down there. That secures that bead in place, so it's not going to tip up anymore. I'm going to jump across and go into the cream bead next to where we're exiting and pull through. And then I'm going to go back up through that copper bead at the top, like so. There we go. And now we're ready to add the next bead. So I've got my copper bead, and I'm just going to take my needle into the bridging thread at the top here and pull through. And then I'm going to go back up to secure it in place. Now we need to miss a bead out, so I'm going to take my needle down through this copper bead on the row below, like that, and pull. And then I'm going to jump across, and we're going to go into the next copper bead along. But just by doing that, we have effectively given ourselves a space and moved along to the next bead. And do make sure you pull that thread nice and tight, so the sort of the thread that we've just jumped across with is hidden between those beads. And now I'm going to pick up my last copper bead, and I'm going to use the bridging thread that's going between the copper and the dark red on the previous row. There we go, like that, and pull, and we're going to go back up to secure. Right, we're moving on to dark red now. So I've just got one of my beads, and I'm going to go into this bridging thread, and I can see there's 2 threads here, so I'm just going to find one thread to use. There we go, and take that through and pull, and I'm going to go back up to secure it in place. I've picked up another dark red, and I'm just going to use the bridging threads on the end here. I've got cream on my hands, so my hands are quite slippy, but I'll get there in the end. There we go, push that through. And I'm going to go back up to secure it. And now we need to move along again by another bead, so we can just add the 2 beads on the top here. So we're just going to take our needle down into the dark red that's directly below where we're exiting and pull. And then we're going to jump across and up into the next red along. There we go, and wiggle those beads and pull to make that thread disappear. There we go. So I'm going to pick up a dark red bead there, and we're going to go under the bridging thread that's going between the dark red and the lighter red there, and pull, and we're going to go back up to secure it. And we're going to add the last bead of our 2 hearts, and that's another dark red, and I'm just going to go ahead and pick out one of those 2 threads there. There we go, and pull through. And I'm going to go back up. There we go. Those are our hearts finished. Now, because like I say, I know how I'm going to use this, I'm going to go ahead and knot this thread off. So to do that, I'm just going to take my needle down into the next red along, and it's going to secure that end bead nice and firmly, and then I'll tie my knots through this beadwork. If you're not sure how you're going to use it, you could leave your threads sort of loose until you do decide. You could add some beaded loops, or maybe a loop at the top, or something to add a chain, however you want to use it. But I'm going to go away and finish this off, and I shall come back and show you the finished necklace. Here's my finished necklace. As you can see, I've made 5 of my interlocking hearts, and I've joined them together just by popping a jump ring on the outer edges of the hearts, and I've used a little sort of detail on some eye pins with some faceted beads. And this light red here is the same Delica bead on the inside of this heart, just to join them together. But that's the finished heart necklace, which I think is really pretty. I shall leave all the sort of the names of the beads in the description below, and I shall leave a link where you can go and grab this pattern off my blog. Thanks so much for watching, and I shall see you again soon. Bye!